Are you ready to accelerate the growth of your business? Welcome to the Revenue Growth Podcast. This is the place for business owners, sales leaders, and marketing professionals to get ideas and inspiration to drive exponential revenue growth. Each week, you'll get actionable insights from the world's leading marketing and sales thought leaders and practitioners. Are you ready to grow? Let's join our host, Daryl Amy, author of Revenue Growth Engine.
Welcome back to the Revenue Growth Podcast, where we are on a mission to help 10,000 generous business owners double their revenue together. We are going to generate over $10 billion in net new giving. I'm your host, Daryl Amy. And if you want to grow revenue, you need to grow your network. And there's nobody better at coaching us on how to grow our network than our guest today, Drew Sechrist. He was one of the first employees at Salesforce, and now he's the co-founder of Connect the Dots. This is an incredible platform, and get ready for an incredibly powerful conversation. If you have a sales team and you want to boost results, you need to get to know selling from the heart. What's great about selling from the heart is how it takes a different approach to driving sales. The goal, build trust quickly with clients and prospects through authenticity. The result is more effective prospecting, higher close rates, and more referrals. And best of all, the selling from the heart methodology works with your existing sales model. To learn more, visit www.sellingfromtheheart.net and make sure to listen to me and my co-host Larry Levine each week on the Selling from the Heart podcast. Well, our guest today is Drew Sechrist. It's a great story. A cold email to Marc Benioff in 1999 landed Drew an account executive job at Salesforce, where he was employee number 36. Drew went on to become the company's highest producing seller and then the highest producing sales manager as Salesforce scaled from zero to more than $1 billion in revenue. Well, as a young seller, leaders like Marc Benioff, Jim Steele, and Susan St. Ledger transformed Drew's career by opening their networks and making warm introductions on Drew's behalf. Well, with that in mind, Drew co-founded Connect the Dots to make that type of experience possible for anyone. So Drew, welcome to the Revenue Growth Podcast. It's great to have you here. What an amazing story.
Daryl, thanks for having me. And great intro. That's basically what happened. And it was a kind of a magical time getting hired into Salesforce that early on, and kind of falling in luckily to this incredible group of people that opened up all these opportunities for me. So that was a very transformative experience in my life, and it's kind of led me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think we can all look back and realize that when you look in hindsight, that where you are today is a result of people you met along the way. I mean, your network, Larry, we talk about Larry, our co-host at Selling to the Heart. We talk all the time about your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. Building your network today is in some ways never been easier, but in some ways it's also a little bit more complicated. Where do you think the challenges are when it comes to building your network as a sales professional and an entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, I think the one really obvious thing right now is that COVID has completely changed our physical location. So we're not in offices together. And if I go back to 1999, when I sent that cold email to Marc Benioff, and that led to him inviting me out to San Francisco and interviewing, and he offered me a job on the spot. I had to move physically from North Carolina across the country, pack all my stuff up in a U-Haul, drive it, across the continent to San Francisco, because that job was in an office in San Francisco with the other team members. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it is anymore.
No, it sure isn't.
No, I mean, like in North Carolina, if I were in North Carolina now and this opportunity happened, they'd say, great, you can start on Monday. We'll FedEx you your laptop and just join this Zoom meeting, and, we'll get you all set up. And I think that there's some great stuff about that. Let's be honest about that. It's incredible that you can tap into talent all across the planet, and you can build teams that are, you could have never assembled before because of this new openness and the technology that allows us to be in different places. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is when you're not physically with people, all day, Monday through Friday in the office, you're not building relationships quite the same way. You don't see each other in quite the same way. And, a lot of what we did was we'd work hard during the day, and then we would all, go out and have a drink in the in the evening after work, and talk about our wins and our losses and the things that we learned that day. And there's a lot of stuff around the water cooler where you're sharing information about, what's working and what's not working. And I remember very distinctly, very early in my career, I didn't, candidly, I didn't know what I was doing as a young salesperson, but I was
None of
surrounded.
us did. None of us did.
We don't come out of the womb knowing how to do sales, but because I was in this room with all these other incredible sellers, some of them were, peers of mine, some of them were managers, some of them were senior leadership, like, Marc Benioff. You absorb all that through osmosis, and then you're in the process of doing that, you're bonding with those people, and you're winning things together, and some things are not going right together, but you're building these deep relationships, and then they transcend not, that job. That job ended up lasting 10 years for me at Salesforce, but those relationships have gone on, my lifetime, and I know that they will continue until my lifetime ends.
It is amazing. And so if you think about the environment right now, and the challenge we have in sales, I believe, is that we live in a world where trust is at an all-time low. We have very skeptical buyers. We have, people, word of the year, I think in 2018 was post-trust. Like, this is a time where there's not a lot of trust in anybody, certainly in organizations, and as sales professionals, when it comes time to reach out to that potential buyer. This is the very first thing we've got to do, is we've got to establish trust. And I think there's no better way to establish trust than out of a solid network. I think it's where we go to reference to find trust. And so all of that to say, when you look at your network right now, I don't think there's a bigger or more important thing for a sales professional or an entrepreneur to have than a strong network, because this is the foundation on which you can build trust. Bigger network, more opportunities to build trust. Small network, I think it's a big roadblock. And I'm curious what you're seeing out there when it comes to trust related to the people that are in your network.
Yeah, for sure. I think you hit the nail on the head. The number one filter that we have as human beings when we are approached by another human being is, do I know this person? Should I trust this person? That's the number one thing. It's the first thing that goes up. And in the world of sales today, much of this is being done online, because we're not in offices for the most part. Nobody's coming and knocking on your door and pitching you a product, in your office. That's just not happening. And so what is happening is we are being approached, and you could say bombarded by sales pitches. If you're a decision maker, if you have a budget, then you know what it's like to look at your inbox, and your inbox is, a good percentage of your day is you're just deleting all these messages that you got from people that you don't know. If I don't know you, the probability that I'm going to read that email is very low. There's just too much stuff going on, right? Yeah. But when you get an email from somebody you do know, then you look at it, and assuming you know that person pretty well, you're going to open it up, you're going to read it, you're going to reply to it. That's just what we do as human beings. It's a binary flip. I don't know you, I'm deleting that email. I'm too busy. I'm sorry. I don't know what's in that email, but I just don't have time to figure it out. I know you, I'm going to read that email, and I'm going to reply to that email. And so there's never been a time that's more critical. And I think COVID and everybody going to this remote first environment, it's never been more critical to have a network that you can tap into of trusted relationships where your name is known, where people are, they're happy to reply to you. They want to reply to you because they know who you are and they trust you, and you've had, years or potentially decades of experience together. So I think you're 100% right on this. There's never been a time where trust and existing relationships have been more important than now.
So all of this comes together in Connect the Dots. Tell us about Connect the Dots and where the vision came from. What is it? I've seen it. Really, really super cool. But I'd love for our audience to learn about what you've cooked up here.
Sure. Well, the origin goes back to those very early days when I took the job as employee number 36 at Salesforce. And I had been west of the Mississippi one other time in my life. That was it. So I didn't know anything about California. I didn't know anybody out there. The only people I knew in California or in San Francisco were my new coworkers that I had just met.
Wow.
And I happened to be very, very lucky that my new coworkers were, the original team of Salesforce. So they were great people. They were very successful in all the things that they had done leading up to Salesforce. They had a lot of experience in Silicon Valley. They had a lot of them went to college there. So they had their, college networks. A lot of them had previously worked in other technology companies, or basically everybody did. So they had those networks. And so I stepped into that. There were 35 people there before I got there, and they all had pretty good networks. And I was probably the youngest person on the team, or thereabouts, almost the youngest person. So I could tap into that. That's what I found. The hack for me at that point in my career was, I don't have a network, and I'm stepping into a sales role where a network would be very helpful. Although it wasn't critical at that point, but it was like, because we were, we had a marketing machine, and Marc was doing this great job of talking up a big game about how Salesforce is going to really disrupt software. And it was no software, that
I remember, yeah.
Sign they've got the no software sign. So we had some good leads coming in, and we could take those leads and sell out to them. But as we started going up market, it was really critical to know the decision makers and the key influencers in larger deals and larger companies. And that's when my team came into really, became very, very useful to me. I could ask Marc. Marc was in the office with us, and I could say, "Hey, Marc, do you know somebody at Apple? We're trying to sell to Apple." And he'd say, "Sure, I know, this senior executive from something that we did together." And then I'd say, "Great, Marc, I'm going to write the email for you, so you don't have to think about it. I'm going to write the email for you in your voice, and then you can send it to your senior contact at Apple, and then that will tee up the conversation. And the conversation is not going to be, hey, talk to Drew, the junior salesperson over here. The first tee up is probably going to be, hey, talk to me, Marc Benioff, and let's see if we can help you with, what our technology can bring to Apple." And then I would ride shotgun on that meeting and inherit the credibility of Marc Benioff, right? So I'd go into the meeting with Marc, and then Marc would have the first conversation. And then the senior executive at Apple would say, "Okay, well, this is really interesting. We should talk about this." And Marc would say, "That's great. That's why Drew's here. Drew's going to help you with all the details." And so I earned my stripes by, riding shotgun with Marc, watching Marc do the executive level conversation. And then I pick up all the grunt work, and I would work through all the grunt work and get that deal done. And that was, leveraging that existing, Marc's got those existing relationships. My other boss, my other, senior leadership, my bosses, even my other colleagues, they all had these relationships. And if I could figure out who they knew, then I could leverage their relationship, and then I could repeat that over and over and over again. And that's exactly what we did. We did that for a decade, frankly. I learned that trick, and then we would use these relationships to get the initial conversation. And then we'd pass the relationship off to the new person who's going to go run that opportunity until they get it closed. And then gradually we started having happy, successful customers, and they became part of our, relationship graph. These are the people that are actually buying our software. They would buy our Salesforce software, and then they would say, "This is great. We're getting a lot of value out of this." And then, of course, the next question, and I know that this is something near and dear to your heart in the selling from the heart approach. Referrals are gold. So once you have a happy customer, that person's part of your network, and you should be leveraging that person to get to all these other people that you can help. And birds of a feather, they know the same type of people. If they're buying your software, they definitely know other people that could buy your software too. And so anyway, that started a chain reaction over the years. The biggest pain point that we had, though, in doing this was finding out later that you had this relationship that you could have leveraged, but you didn't leverage it because you didn't know. Because there was just nowhere to look and see all the relationships that everybody in your network had. Now, at some point, along came LinkedIn, and LinkedIn did change the game significantly. And I would say in the early days, it was actually fantastic for this because it was smaller, and the people who were connected actually did know each other. There's a high probability that they were well connected. So you could look at LinkedIn, and that did help us a lot. You weren't LinkedIn to everybody that you knew in the world, but you were LinkedIn to a bunch of them. But then later, now pushing 2 decades of LinkedIn, there's all these connections on LinkedIn where it's not, I talk to senior executives all the time. The one I was talking to last night is a CEO of a 2,000 person software company. And I said, the problem with LinkedIn, he's like, I know what the problem with LinkedIn is. Like 1 in 5 people I actually know on it. And I was like, 1 in 5, that's not bad. I usually hear about 1 in 10.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. The challenge is like, okay, now how do I use LinkedIn to actually find my way to get to the people the decision makers and the influencers on the deals that I want to sell. And you run into a lot of roadblocks, and you burn a lot of kind of energy and social capital by, if I say, hey, Daryl, it looks like so-and-so, could you make an introduction for me? I want to talk to him about blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, Drew, I'm sorry. I
don't really know him. Yeah. I think that happened to me it happened to me yesterday at breakfast, and it probably happened to me 2 or 3 times last week.
Yeah. And I don't want to be the guy who does that to you 2 or 3 or 5 times. And like, hey, Daryl, how about this person? No. Okay. Nope. Hey, Drew. Right. At some point you're like, Drew, I got a day job, I'm happy to help you, man. But so that's the problem that we solve. And, we felt this pain, but I've also felt the incredible joy of finding those right connections. And, an example, just an anecdote from history. In the very early days of in the first 5 years of Salesforce, we ended up hiring in a new head of sales named Jim Steele. And Jim came from IBM, and he had a great Rolodex. And he's just an amazing sales leader, and he knows everybody. He's like, golfing with presidents and former presidents. He's really, really well connected. And Marc asked me to interview him as one of the stops in his process. Should we hire this guy? And Marc was like, what do you think, Drew? Should we hire him? And I said, 2 thumbs up. He's amazing. He's going to up our game so much. I can't wait to work with him. And so we hired him. And, the next week or 2 weeks later, when Jim was in the office, he was like, hey, Drew, I just want to say thank you so much for giving the green light to Marc for me. How can I repay you? And I was like, this is easy. Here's my territory. Here's my list of accounts.
That's right.
Who do you know at these accounts? So we went right down the list.
Beautiful.
And he found one. He's like, oh, I know the president of worldwide operations at that one.
Wow.
We called that guy up. We got a meeting the next week. In 2+ months, we'd closed $1 million deal. And that was when $1 million deal was a big deal. Like we didn't, it was one of our first $1 million deals. And I would say chance of that happening if Jim didn't have that relationship, 0.
Right.
So there's $1 million deal that happened because we knew that relationship existed. And it would have been a $0 deal if we didn't know that relationship existed. And the light went on for me. Like I knew that we could do these things, but the light really went on for me there. And I thought, my gosh, if we could just figure out how to do this all the time, because all of us have these really complex networks. We know so many people. Think about all the people that you know in your life, Daryl, and Daryl, in your role. I mean, you meet so many people. And you have interesting, pretty deep conversations pretty quickly. So you get to know, you're kind of speed dating,
Absolutely.
So you meet a lot of people, and you can be this like super node connecting people to each other. And then you think about, there's work, there's all the stuff that you do in your personal life, all your personal activities. You might be in a bicycling club. You might go on. I think I saw that you organize missions and you fund missions. You've had multiple careers and your former colleagues from them. I see that, your customers, people who buy your book, all books, journalists that you talk to, everybody's got this network. And as you go through life, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's like chaotic. And how do you organize that? And we really decided like, this is an incredibly untapped resource for all of us. All of us have this. And each one of us, when you become a node on a network with everybody else, it grows exponentially, and it can really open almost any door for you. You just have to be able to know where to look. And that was the key. That was the key problem that needed to be solved. How do you know which door to open? And we think we think we know how to do that. And we can make that happen for everybody now.
Yeah. So tell us about Connect the Dots. I just got signed up, and it looks like a pretty cool concept based on email, not so much on your social network.
Well, here's the secret. The biggest untapped social network in the world is one that's not even a social network. It's just your old emails. Think about it. We've been emailing for decades now. And, go back to your Hotmail accounts and your Yahoo account and, your Gmail account, and then every email account that you've had at work. You've emailed thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of times. There are people out there that have email boxes in the millions and even tens of millions. There's a lot of people that you've communicated with. And the cool thing about email, as opposed to a social graph like Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that, is that those social graphs are binary. You're either connected or you're not. And so the problem with a binary social graph is that everybody looks the same and there's a lot of noise. And so that's if I try to use that to figure out my best path to get an introduction to somebody, then I'm going to annoy you a lot. A lot of the time I'm going to say, hey, Daryl, could you introduce me? And you're like, sorry. Nope, don't know that person. So that makes it hard to traverse that graph and use those relationships to get to the places you need to know. With email comes with this really neat feature in that it's already telling you who really knows who, because you've actually emailed back and forth and 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 back and forth over the years and over the decades. And so you can see you can calculate how well people know each other.
Wow.
And you can unearth relationships that people have that they totally forgot about, but there were significant relationships. You might have had a customer that you interacted with a lot 14 years ago, and you built a great relationship, and they were a very happy customer, but then they went on with their life and you went on with your life in different directions, and you just didn't cross paths again. And after 14 years, we only have so much ability to remember all of the interactions we've had in our lives. So that person's name and photo on the internet might be, nothing that triggers a memory for you. If you saw them on LinkedIn, you're like, I don't know who that is. I mean, I'm LinkedIn, or maybe I'm not even linked into that person. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really spark a memory. But what if you could see all of your email history attached to that person? Now it brings that back to the surface, and you can say, oh, wow, I just had this yesterday when I was talking to somebody. I saw that this person, the CEO that I was speaking with last night, his executive assistant, I actually knew from 2010 when Elon Musk brought a Tesla to, I think it was Silicon Valley Bank. It was a Roadster. Mm-hmm. It was back before that. It was just a Roadster. It was one of the first, really early Roadsters. And it maybe had 10 on the planet or something. And she had emailed me, she had in a different capacity, to invite me to come drive this Roadster. And I replied to her. I was like, absolutely, I'm in. I told her what time I'd be there. And so we had this email exchange. That was 12 years ago. I don't remember her from, but now, thanks to the power of Connect the Dots, her profile has been brought up. I can see in context that she is now the executive assistant for the CEO of this company. And she and I had this interaction 12 years ago. And
wow.
I actually got to drive that Roadster, and it was really awesome.
I bet. Totally cool. Yeah, that's fascinating. So when you're able to look back, you're saying we may not remember something from 14 years ago. I think the older we get, the smaller the internal database gets sometimes. Yeah. Being able to the power of looking back over all those years. And it was funny because when I connected my email accounts to Connect the Dots and saw how many emails were in the inbox of each one of those accounts that I was chewing through, and Connect the Dots is processing now and mapping out, you go, that's a lot of data from just, I submitted 2 of my email addresses and there's more, and you go, that is a lot of data right there. And there's no way that the human brain could process through that data, but you've created the tech to do that.
Yeah. And so I was surprised when the results came in for me. It looks like I know 26,000 people. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I've got about 4,000 LinkedIn contacts, and my guess is I know about 10 to 15% of them, something like that. But that's only 4,000. There are 26,000 people that I've interacted with on email over the years.
Wow.
And so the thing that's the big challenge, the big technical challenge that we've solved, is that those email addresses are all over the place. They represent people at various points in their careers, at different companies, their personal email accounts. And so turning that into a single record for a person and being able to say, hey, your executive assistant was the same person that I interacted with when I drove that Tesla 12 years ago at Silicon Valley Bank. That's hard because she had a completely different email address and identity at that point, right? So she's like, a lot of time has passed and a lot of different jobs have gone. She's gone through. So pulling that together into a single clean way to make those relationships actionable is a really tough thing. But when you can do it, then all 26,000 of those contacts become actionable. Like, I know who they are. I know all the context about how we've interacted in the past. Some of them are very weak relationships, but they're still relationships. And some of them are quite strong relationships that I've kind of just forgotten about because, gosh, I mean, particularly we in sales professions, we interact with so many different people and we can only keep so much in our brains. So you're bound to, like, without a clue, without being having a little bit of help to know how you know that person, you're bound to forget a lot of people.
Amazing. What a cool story and amazing technology. So how can people get their hands on this? This is something I know that everyone's listening in is going to go, I want to see this.
Well, so we have two products essentially. We have a free version. Anybody can sign up for that. There is a wait list for that version right now. But you can sign up at ctd.ai, like connect the dots, ctd.ai. You can sign up on the wait list and we'll let you in as soon as we possibly can. The other product is the business edition product. And this is for companies to deploy, and they can deploy it wall to wall to every employee. They flip a switch and they can connect it to their email server, whether that's Google or Microsoft. And then it builds a graph for everybody in the company. So everybody becomes a connector in the company, and everybody can plug in their own personal Connect the Dots accounts to it as well. So you can you can combine your enterprise and your personal accounts into one massive graph. And then you, as an employee, when you leave, you can unplug and you take that and you keep your contact data with you for life. So those are the two products. So if you're a company, then you can sign up for our business edition product. You should reach out to me. You can reach me at drew@ctd.ai if you'd like to talk about that. And if you're an individual, go to our website, click on the waitlist button and sign up. And if you send me an email and you say that you were on you heard me on the Revenue Growth podcast, then I will send you a link to skip the wait list.
You rock. That is awesome. Well, Drew, thank you for sharing time with us today. Thank you for what you're doing. What an incredible solution to a problem we all have. I really, really appreciate you. This has been totally awesome.
Daryl, thanks so much. It was really fun.
Awesome. And thank you to everybody in the Revenue Growth Podcast audience right here in the middle of the holidays. I just want to say thank you to everybody who has been liking, subscribing, sharing, leaving reviews for the podcast. It helps us spread the word. And we have some exciting things coming up in the new year. So you want to make sure to like or subscribe on whatever platform on which you listen. It's going to be an exciting new year. We've got a lot of headwinds and challenges, but our commitment here at the Revenue Growth Podcast is to bring you fresh ideas you can use to accelerate your revenue growth. So we've got a lot of things ahead. I'm excited. I hope everyone is having a fantastic into the year, wonderful holidays. And until next time, let's get going and let's get growing.